Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a really fascinating paper published on January 15th, 2020 in the journal Frontiers in Psychology. It's by Eric N. Smith and his colleagues, and it's called Stress, Mindsets, and Success in Navy SEALs Special Warfare Training. Basically, we're going to look at how what's in our heads, our mindsets, fundamentally impacts our actual performance in literally one of the most extreme, high-stakes environments on the planet. Here's a quick look at our agenda. We'll break down the study's design, dig into 3 core findings on stress, failure, and willpower, and then wrap up with how we can actually apply this stuff to everyday life. Let's get right to it. Section 1, the Navy SEALs Study, Testing Human Limits. So the backdrop for this research is incredibly dramatic. The researchers wanted to test the absolute boundary conditions of human mindsets. And to do that, they observed candidates going through BUDS, that's basic underwater demolition/SEAL training. Just to help you grasp the extreme stakes here, look at the baseline completion rate. They started with 174 highly vetted candidates, right? Out of all of them, only 25 graduated. That's a completion rate of just 14%, meaning a whopping 86% of these elite candidates dropped out of this nonstop physical and mental grind. Section 2, Designing the Experiment, Measuring Toughness. You might be wondering, how do researchers even begin to study the psychology of such a wild, intense environment? Well, since this was a longitudinal study tracking guys over time, the researchers looked at the candidates' pre-existing mindsets. For their baseline control, they used a standard stress is debilitating mindset. You know, the idea that stress is bad and hurts you. Then, they compared that against an experimental condition. Candidates who scored 1 standard deviation higher in holding a stress is enhancing mindset, people who think stress actually helps them. And to figure out if these mindsets really made a difference, they didn't just ask, hey, how are you feeling? No, they tracked 4 highly objective metrics. First, persistence, which literally means how many weeks a candidate survived. Second, ultimate graduation success. Third, pure physical performance, based on precise obstacle course times. And finally, social evaluations. They actually tracked the positive and negative remarks coming from both peers and instructors. The timeline of candidate drop-off is just staggering. As you can see, there are heavy drop-offs week by week, especially leading up to week 4. That is famously known as Hell Week. We're talking about a period where candidates get maybe 45 minutes of sleep a night while doing continuous, brutal physical drills. It's intense. Section 3, The Power of Stress, Embracing the Suck. Okay, let's get into the actual findings, starting with what happens when you hold that stress is enhancing mindset. So, before training even began, candidates rated how much they agreed with certain statements. And here's the crucial part. Candidates who strongly agreed with this exact quote, "The effects of stress are positive and should be utilized," showed objectively better performance across the board. Let's look at the actual effect sizes. First up, candidates with a highly enhancing stress mindset had a 12% longer persistence rate compared to the baseline group. So they literally just lasted longer before dropping out or succumbing to the pressure. Second, they were a full 27 seconds faster on the incredibly rigorous week 1 obstacle course. To put that into perspective, in an environment where every single second is scrutinized and can literally mean the difference between passing and failing, nearly half a minute is an absolute eternity. And get this, the social benefits were just as impressive. These candidates received 30% fewer negative comments from their instructors every single week. So their mindset wasn't just changing how they felt internally, it tangibly changed how their superiors evaluated their overall competence. It's like a superpower. Moving to Section 4, When Failure Mindsets Fail, the Limits of Growth. Now, this is where the paper throws a bit of a curveball. We hear all the time that failure is a stepping stone to growth, right? So you naturally think a failure is enhancing mindset would be amazing here. Actually, no. It hurt their performance. Look at this striking quote from one of the participants. They said, "It was like sharks smelling blood in the water. The instructors saw that I was struggling and they swarmed." You see, in a hyper-evaluative environment like BUDS, early failures invite insanely harsh scrutiny. It definitely wasn't some safe space for a learning opportunity. And the data totally backs up that harsh reality. Candidates who came in firmly believing that failure is a good thing, they actually persisted 10% less. And even more wild, they had a 52% lower chance of successfully completing Phase 1. Their mindset just fundamentally clashed with an environment where failure is actively, brutally punished rather than nurtured. Section 5. The willpower paradox. The third psychological variable the team looked at was the non-limited willpower mindset. Basically, this is the belief that your energy isn't some finite battery that drains over time, but instead, it's actually maintained or even boosted when you exert effort. Sounds great in theory, right? Well, when we look at the standardized beta effect sizes here, a massive paradox emerges. Holding an unlimited willpower mindset didn't predict physical persistence or obstacle course times at all. Nothing. But it did carry a surprisingly steep social cost. Candidates who strongly believed their willpower was unlimited ended up receiving 21% more instructor demerits and a staggering 76% more negative peer evaluations. The researchers think that because these guys believe energy is endless, they might come across as way less empathetic or supportive to teammates who are just visibly wiped out and struggling. They basically looked like bad teammates. Finally, Section 6, Mindsets in Everyday Life Beyond the Battlefield. So what's the big takeaway here? How on earth do we apply findings from extreme Navy SEALs training to our own typical work or personal goals? The paper comes to a really powerful conclusion. Right now, a ton of organizations pour massive resources into stress reduction. But the data tells us that instead of just trying to eliminate stress, which, let's be honest, is often impossible, organizations and managers should actively help people build a stress-is-enhancing mindset. That is the actual secret to building real, measurable resilience. I want to leave you with a thought to reflect on. The very next time you're facing a high-pressure, incredibly demanding situation, stop and ask yourself, are you viewing your stress as a giant barrier that's just draining you? Or can you flip the script? Can you view that exact stress as the very fuel you need to enhance your performance and absolutely crush it?